Donald Trump turned up to the Supreme Court hearing on his own efforts to overturn birthright citizenship. He actually got there early, which apparently he never does, but when he saw that things weren't going his way, he left. He has been posting about birthright citizenship on social media for a while now. He says the United States is the only country that has it. That is absolutely just flat out factually untrue. He says it anyway, and then his supporters never question him or call him out on anything because they don't care to. But he can complain about it all he wants. The Supreme Court still has to rule on it. And Trump has a very sycophantic Supreme Court. He, along with other Republican presidents, deliberately crafted it to reflect conservative values and ideals, even if those values and ideals are unpopular with and unrepresentative of the American people. Many of the justices who sit on the court doling out these high-brained judgments on all manner of issues and people are themselves openly and unapologetically corrupt, or even more simply, unjust, and therefore unfit to be judging others. And of course, there's no real way to get rid of them. We just have to wait for them to either retire, and many of them don't, or die, and many of them don't. So Trump sat there watching the court he helped to build over the course of his two very unpopular presidential terms as they debated birthright citizenship.
Okay, and let's talk about its applications. So, there are some, I can imagine it being messy on some applications. So what would you do with what the common law called foundlings? The thing about this is then you have to adjudicate. If you're looking at parents, and if you're looking at parents' domicile, then you have to adjudicate both residence and intent to stay. What if you don't know who the parents are?
I think there are marginal cases. That one, I think, has the benefit of being addressed in 1401F, where it talks about
Yeah. But what about the Constitution?
Under the Constitution, domicile is a constitutional standard in all kinds of other situations.
Well, and it's hard.
Diversity jurisdiction, personal jurisdiction, sorry.
Well, yeah, and a personal jurisdiction, 1332, diversity jurisdiction. And the thing is, it has to be litigated because it turns on intent. And the virtue of both jus soli and jus sanguinis, whichever one you pick, it's a bright line rule.
No other president has ever done this. Trump is the first president to go to the Supreme Court and listen to arguments on a case with his name on it. This is Trump v. Barbara, and Trump sat there right next to his then Attorney General, Pam Bondi. And yes, his then Attorney General, Bondi, has since been relieved of her post. Good riddance. He's just going to replace her with someone even worse, so we'll have to wait and see who that's going to be. And if she's upset about it, perhaps someone should just yell the current state of the Dow at her repeatedly, because I hear that helps. In Trump's rampage against immigrants, illegal or otherwise, Trump declared in an executive order that the United States was doing away with it for the most part. It would only apply to the children of legal U.S. citizens and permanent residents. His base was very excited about this, but it created chaos in many practical applications. Thousands of babies and children no longer knew their legal citizenship status because Trump just signed an executive order without considering the consequences of his actions or who was going to clean up the mess he created or how. None of that is his problem. So the Supreme Court had to get involved to determine what was going to happen in various cases should the president get his way. As you heard on that recording, Trump-appointed Justice Amy Coney Barrett asked Solicitor General John D. Sauer about some of the more technical points of Trump's executive order. Considering the crux of Trump's plan requires knowledge of the children's parents' legal status, she asked about what happens to children in cases when we don't know who their parents are constitutionally. Sauer didn't really give her much of an answer, so she responded to him.
How would it work? How would you adjudicate these cases? You're not going to know at the time of birth for some people whether they have the intent to stay or not, including U.S. citizens, by the way. What if you have someone who is living in Norway with their husband and family, but is still a U.S. citizen, comes home and has her child here and goes back? How do we know whether the child is a U.S. citizen because the parent didn't have an intent to stay?
I'd say make 2 points, one practical, one legal. The practical point is under the terms of this executive order, you don't have to because the executive order turns on objectively verifiable things, which is immigration status. Are you lawfully present but temporarily present, or do you have an illegal status? So those kind of taking evidence, so to speak, under subjective intent wouldn't be done. And as to the constitutional point, obviously domicile is baked into a lot of constitutional and legal concepts, and there may be situations situations where facts are determined, but if you look at the guidance that all the agencies did after this court in Costa said the agency could go forward and issue guidance, the guidance provides, I think, very, very clear, objective, verifiable approaches to doing this. And so as a practical matter, I don't think it's presented by this executive order.
Since when has any guidance coming from Trump provided clear, objective, verifiable approaches to anything? After Barrett's line of questioning, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, a Biden appointee, went a little bit further. She asked more specifically, how does this work? Are you suggesting that when a baby is born, people have to have documents, present documents? Is this happening in the delivery room? Are we determining when or whether a newborn child is a citizen of the United States under your rule? Sauer responded saying that it would work similarly to how Social Security numbers are issued based on birth certificates, but she continued, now, you say your rule turns on whether the person intended to stay in the United States, and I think Justice Barrett brought this up. So are we bringing pregnant women in for depositions? What are we doing to figure this out? Yes, clear, objective, and verifiable indeed, but it gets messier. There's apparently no opportunity then for the person to prove or to say that they actually intended to stay in the United States, Jackson noted. Sauer said that if a baby was denied citizenship, the ruling could be disputed, which would, of course, create more of a backlog in our legal system than already exists, not to mention it would likely be very costly for the parents on top of everything else that people today in this country need to worry about. And Jackson sort of alluded to that, saying, after the fact, after their baby has been denied citizenship, then we can go through the process. After Trump left the court, things did not turn in his favor. Several judges, including many of his appointees, were not convinced of Sauer's arguments. They're expected to release their final judgment on the matter in June, so we will have to see what happens, or if anything happens between now and then. What's frustrating about this is obviously that this is what the Supreme Court is being kept busy with right now, as if there is nothing else for them to be litigating. Trump probably thinks that it will earn him some goodwill within his MAGA base, and maybe it will, but for the majority of the country, this is a giant waste of time. Trump is desperate to distract the American people from the Epstein files, from his disgraceful performance in Iran, from the fact that he is an Israeli puppet, and from the fact that despite Americans suffering at home, he is actively and deliberately making things worse for us. And he's not sorry. He said the other day that the federal government does not have time to worry about issues here at home. Those are state issues, he said. So he wants to pawn all of our federal government's responsibilities and obligations down to the states, but we're still expected to pay the same amount of money in federal taxes every year. At this point, according to him, the only thing our federal government is good for is doing military stuff. So all of our federal tax dollars are apparently going to that one thing. Will he be distributing some of those tax dollars back to the states if he assumes the states are to take on all of these giant financial burdens? No, he didn't mention anything like that. The American people are getting very little for what we do pay for. But of all these socialist, communist things that we're all horrible people for wanting, things like paid college tuition, healthcare for all, financial aid for having babies, the Israelis get all of those things and more. And yes, we are the ones paying for all of it. And no one ever calls the Israelis communists for having and enjoying those things. No one calls the US government communist for paying for them to have all those things. We have problems at home that we need to deal with and address. Instead, all of our money is going abroad to a conflict that the overwhelming majority of Americans do not support, and all of this is being done by a president who promised not to do any of this. He's doing it because Israel wants him to, because weapons manufacturers successfully lobbied for this, and because he does not care about any of us. That's weird behavior, but we accept it from this guy for some reason, and I wish we would stop doing that. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.